Welcome to another Word of Torah. Rod Bryant, Moshe Avram's here. Oh, that's
Hey.
Moshe. I'm Rod. And we're so happy to see you. We're excited. It seems like that Moshe just moves around all over Eretz Israel because he's in a different room every time we have a class. I don't. How many rooms does your house have? I mean,
I'm just going wherever I'm not in the way. Actually, you say that I'm moving around. My wife just looked at this shirt and she said, "Are you going to Beersheba?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "You look like a bus driver." I was like, "Oh, so I really like this shirt. But it looks like a uniform, apparently." So
That's funny.
Yeah, I move around all the time.
Well, I remember I bought a white short sleeve, sort of over the, tucked out of your pants, not in your pants, but out, like a
Right.
casual shirt.
Yeah.
And I had black pants, and we went to a nice restaurant, and all of the waiters there were dressed the same.
Oh, amazing. Did you get any tips?
It was so embarrassing that I said, I am never wearing this shirt out again, except at the house. I mean, everybody was kind of like, what is this waiter sitting here eating with this woman?
Yeah, it's very familiar. Oh, brilliant.
Okay, so we're here in another Word of Torah. Sorry, guys, for boring you with that little bit of human life, but we're really excited about this verse coming up. It's Genesis, the second chapter, verse 21. There's so much to unpack here, and I'm going to try not to interrupt you. I'll just do this over here.
Good, I like it.
Like I'll get excited. I'll try not to interrupt you too much. Doing this, there's my favorite foodie guy. It's called Everybody Feed Phil on Somebody Feed Phil on Netflix. And the guy was saying in a private conversation, they said, when you're always excited about every food, how do we know when it taste good? Because he never never does that.
Right.
So he said that when he tastes food and it's horrible, he'll get up out of his chair and do a change.
Right.
And that means it's horrible.
So now you're watching out for it when he's
every time.
Yeah.
So that does not mean that. If I do this, that's good. Okay, I'll do that for you.
Wicked.
Okay, here we go. We are in the second chapter of Genesis, verse 21. So if you want to pull open your Tanakh or whatever you're using to follow along, go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and give it to you.
Well, I suspect that you will be weighing in on this one because this is one of those ones that you can't resist weighing in on. Because last week, of course, we were talking about this idea that God was looking for an Ezer Kenegdo, which often gets translated as a helper for him. And that's not what it says. It says a helper, Kenegdo, neged means against, and kaf means like. So it's like a helper against him.
Mm-hmm.
And then God did this strange thing where he then made a load of animals and walked them past Adam to see what he would name them. And you think, well, what's he doing? And at the end of it, he said he didn't, the Torah says he didn't find a helper for him, a helper against him. And you think, well, why is it doing that? Because really my theory is if you leave out that word, then you've missed the idea of what a relationship is really supposed to be. That it's supposed to be, two equals, steel sharpening steel. But even if you lose that word, the idea of God showing all the animals, which could be a good helper for him, but none of which are an equal, and then saying, I did not find a helper against him amongst all of the animals. It shows you, we're really looking for someone, the wife to be an equal, someone to challenge the man. And so he's dispensed with that idea that it could be anything else but the woman. And then, today is the day where we actually meet her, and it's totally bizarre. So this time isn't so much bizarre about. Oh, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, just for the listener, we're getting ready to get a really important key, a cryptic key for marriage. Yeah, go ahead.
Right, and this one here isn't necessarily so much about revealing the character of the woman as it reveals a little bit about God. When it shows how God brings this woman about. So that's a kind of little shift, but it's within that same story. So it says, V'yikra ha'adam shmot. And so this is just like the name of the book, V'yikra, which is Leviticus in Greek, but V'yikra in Hebrew. Kara means to call or name. Yikra would be he will call, and V'yikra, this is a tense flipping verb, flips the tense from the future to the past. So V'yikra means he called, past tense. And it's Ha'adam, the man who's doing it, and it's Shmot, names. V'yikra ha'adam shmot l'kol ha'behema, all the big like mammals. Ula of hashemayim, and le for of flying things hashemayim of the heavens. So it's listing all these animals that went past Adam and got named, and then it says ula kol, and le for kol all hayat hasadeh. Now, if you're new to Torah but you know a little bit, you might think chayot is plural, because there's a feminine plural, which is ot, right? So chai is life, chayot would be lives, so animals, that kind of thing. But this rather means chayot with a vav, the little dot over it. This is chayat. That's a special kind of taf. That means that's an of taf. So chayot, feminine plural, chayat, life of hasadeh, the fields. This is where we finished off last time. Ula Adam, and for Adam, lo matzah ezer kenegdo. It was not found. He did not find a helper like against him. So then now God is going to bring about this helper. And how he does it, it's so cool. Okay, so watch out for this. To start with, we have vayapel. Now, we've talked about these binyanim, these different intensities of verbs, right? And so if I tell you that down the bottom, I've got a little clue. Now, you notice what I'm doing here. I'm taking this vav, which is red, I'm turning it blue just to signify this is a tense flipper. So we have the verb here, we have the yod, green yod tells us he or it will do it. The vav flips it the past tense. And I'm going to flip this one down here as well, because this is also a past tense verb, and this one here as well. Now you're going to ask yourself, how do I know? Well, I'll reveal that as we go. Because one of the things which is the most frustrating thing to hear ever when you're learning is context. Because you don't have the context when you're learning,
Right.
But when you get so used to it that when you read the whole sentence, you go, it must be past tense, not and a future tense, because all the verbs in the sentence are past tense. Vayapel is past tense, something happened, v'yikach, v'yisigor. So could this one here, vayishan, could that be future tense? Something happened past tense, then future, then past. No, they must all be past tense. They must be all flipping, right? The only time it could be that it's happening in the future is either if it's prophecy or someone speaking. This will happen. So we know that these verbs are past tense. Let's have a look at them in context. Vayapel. The root of that is nafal, right? That is to fall, right? But if we look at this in its simplest sense, first of all, you notice that the nun is missing. There's a nun missing off the beginning, right? So that's because that nun is a weak letter. They can just sometimes go missing, right? So it's still the same verb. But if you were to say that that means to fall, to lie, to be cast down, to fail, then vayapel Adonai Elohim means God fell down. But this doesn't say foul. This is pale. So there's two changes. One is that we've got this little dagesh in here, turns it from a fey into a pay. Now it's a hard sound. And the other one is this vowel, the tsere. And this is a more intense vowel than the patach that's under the fey. Right? So what's happening is, I'll tell you how to spot these in the future, but I'll just tell you for now that this one is a causative. So rather than God falling, God is calling something to fall. He's causing something to fall al ha'adam, on the man, right? Now, a lot of translations will say he caused a deep sleep to fall on him.
Correct.
And then it says vayishan, and he slept. But the problem is, if this is sleep and this is sleep, you'd expect them to look the same. This word sounds like taradema. And this word sounds like yishan. Well, they don't sound similar at all. They don't have any letters in common, right? So they must not be the same root. They must not be the same word. This must mean something else, right? So if I want to say I'm going to sleep, I will say eshan. Or if someone says, where have you just come from? I slept. I can say ashanti, yashanti. Okay, so that's the word we use for sleep. But if you take this tardema and you put it into Google Translate, if you look at modern Hebrew, you look in a modern Hebrew dictionary, you'll get anesthetic. So wow,
right. That's
happening.
That's good.
So
Right.
I went to when I was in Manchester, I went to my synagogue, and I happened to, this is a good quality synagogue, so it's going to have an anesthesiologist in there somewhere. So I
Of
found
course.
my friend, the anesthesiologist, and I said,
And a couple of lawyers. Anyway.
Right. So I'll go to them when I want to know what's the difference between a contract and a covenant. In fact,
right.
one of my previous rabbi's wife was a lawyer, and she told me the difference between a contract and a covenant, and that comes up on the Torah all the time.
Yes.
But yeah, absolutely. So I went to this anesthesiologist. I said, "What is Tadema?" And he said, "Oh, I love this question. Are you in Genesis 2?" And I said, "Yeah."
Brilliant.
He says, everyone comes and asks me that. I said, "Great. So what is it?" And he said, "Well, what do you think it is?" And I said, "Well, I got the translation of deep sleep." And he said, no. It is fundamentally different from sleep. He said, if you are asleep and I cut you, you wake up. I said, so what is it? And he said, it is an artificial coma. Now, we don't want to assume that the modern Hebrew is the same as the ancient Hebrew, because the modern Hebrew took this word for anesthetic from the word tardema, which is in the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
But let's have a look at why it took that word. Right?
Yeah,
So
you'll know. Here we go.
Right. Now, for a moment, we'll call it anesthetic, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
V'yapel Adonai Elohim tardema al ha'adam. God caused to fall an anesthetic on the man. V'yesham, and he slept. V'yikach, and he took. The root of this is lakach. So v'yikach, and he took. Echat mitzalotav. Now, what's happening here is we've got the root in here. Oh dear. We've got the root in here, which is tzela.
Mm-hmm.
That's tzadi lamed ayin.
Tzela.
And this is mitzela, is from the tzela, and it's tzelot. You see, there's a dot here, which is an O sound of taf. So this is plural, feminine plural. Mitzelot, from the tzelas. The yod also has a pluralizing effect, and the vav at the end means his. So the debate is, what does this mean? Is it side or is it rib? And if you look here, you get tzela is a side, a rib, or a beam. Okay, fine. So the debate is actually, it can be either side. It can come from either thing, because a tzela, it can be a side because that's where your ribs are, and it comes from the word rib. Or the ribs are called tzela because they're in the side, and that's where your side is. And we have to figure out, are there any clues whether this is side or rib? So it's let's call it side just for the moment, right? V'yikach echat, that's the feminine word for the number one, okay? Because tzela is feminine, right? So, and he took one from his sides, right? Now, it could be one from his ribs, one from his sides. And then it says, v'yisgor basar tachtena, right? Now, what's basar? You can't eat basar and chalav together. Well, we can't eat chalav. Other people are allowed to, but we're not allowed to eat chalav and basar together. We can't eat meat and milk together. Basar is meat. Right? But what does yisgor mean? Well, you'll see yisgor on a shop door. In the daytime, it'll say patach, open. And in the evening, it'll say segur, closed. So the verb is to close. So he took one of his sides and he closed the basar. He closed the flesh afterwards. So now there's anesthetic and there's closing up the flesh. This sounds like an operation.
Absolutely.
This doesn't sound like it's not like a spiritual thing. It sounds like really physically something is happening. So my question is, if this was the rib, can you just take the rib and then close up afterwards? Or would you have to open him, take the rib, and then close him again? Imagine instead of being the rib, it's a whole side, an aspect, the feminine part of who he is, right? Now, if you're taking half of him, then you have to close the flesh afterwards because it's open, right? But you didn't have to open it because you're not opening and taking a small part. You're just taking a whole half, right? And then closing it afterwards. So the act of taking the tzela is that's what opens it. You don't have to make an incision, take a rib, close them up like an operator. You're dividing, you're bisecting this creature. So that's my theory. But it finishes with tachtena, which tachat is your tuchas, right? That's underneath you.
Right.
It comes from the Hebrew word tachat, which means under. And you get this word as well in terms of replacement, because in verses to do with the descendants of Esau, a lot of his descendants are kings, which, what's the word when they like have a coup for a king?
A
Something for that.
rebellion.
Usurp.
Usurp authority. Yeah.
So they usurp each other, and when he says, and then he became king, tachat, the last one, it means under the last one. What he really means is he's sitting in his chair, right? He's taking his place. So he's saying he took this half and he closed the flesh underneath the incision, right? Underneath the division, underneath where it took. So that's super weird, but it gets weirder.
Oh, it is. Because
this word here shows up only 2 times in the whole of the Tanakh. No, sorry, that's not right. 7 times in the Tanakh, 2 times in the Chumash, 2 times in the 5 books of Moses. And when you get that rare occurrence, you want to say, well, can we look at both of these? Let's compare them and see, is there any connection between what's happening? You get something really cool. Okay, so the first time that this appears is in Genesis 2, verse 21. That's where we are now. The second time isn't until 15:12, and then it doesn't come up again until 1 Samuel, way later. So what's happening in 15? Well, 15 is during the story of Abraham. Can I just read you the English, and we'll just point out the Hebrew when we get to it. So it says, let's go back a couple of verses. This is a conversation between Abraham, our father, and the Boreolam, the creator of the universe. And God's telling him what's going to happen. He says, then he said to him, I am Hashem, who brought you out of of the Chaldees, which is Chasdim in Hebrew, to assign you this land as a possession. Now, why he does that is a whole other discussion. We'll have to wait till we get to the story of Abraham, because that's kind of bananas as well, which is great. And he said to him, O Lord, how shall I know that I am going to take possession of it? And that's like a crazy question. God just told you, I'm going to give you a land. And he's saying, how am I going to take possession? He says, it's not that he's doubting him.
No.
What he's doing is he's saying, I want to know it when it's coming.
Yeah, he's wanting to know the mechanism. Correct.
Right.
Yes,
I want when I'm on the journey, I want to see stuff and go, oh, it's happening,
Right.
So he says, how will I know it's happening? And the reply is even weirder. So came the reply, bring me a 3-year-old female cow, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young bird. You're like, this sounds like the beginning of a pub joke or a magic trick, right?
Right.
And he says he brought all of these and he cut them in 2. Alarm bells are starting to ring, placing each half on top of the other, but he did not cut the bird. Now, I've got a friend who is a retired major in the British Army, and he's got a pretty good handle on Near East custom and culture.
Right.
He was based out in that region for a long time. So he says, in the old world, 2 guys want to make a covenant, just like happens with Jacob and Lavan. That they each bring like a cow, cut it in half, go between the pieces and shake hands, and then each lad takes half from each animal. So they walk away with this cow's worth of animal, but they've swapped. They've kind of exchanged to say we're eating together. We're gonna have a big meal, but it's a way of saying this is how we meet in the middle. We're physically going to meet in the middle of our offerings to each other as a sign of a covenant. That is what's happening between God and Abraham. God is saying, I am bringing you into a covenant, and I'm going to meet you in the middle, and we're going to make a pact. This is called the Brit of the pieces, the covenant of the piece of the animals. But what happens if a person sees the face of God? Right. You can't see the face of God and live. So how is he going to do this? Right. Somehow he has to make him safe. Right. So watch this. This is great. This is really cool. You'll love this. So it says, birds of prey came down on the carcasses, and Abraham drove them away. Notice he's Abram, not Abraham. He hasn't got that hey from the name of God installed in him yet. Correct. But watch out for it. Right. So it says, as the sun was about to set, it says here, Hashemish Lavo, that the sun is coming, because it's coming towards the earth, right? So it's approaching us. When the sun was about to set, a deep sleep fell on Abraham. Where is it? What word is that? It's this word, Vatardema. That's that moment. which we're translating as anesthetic. So how does God make Abraham safe? He anesthetizes him before he encounters him in the physical world. And it says, and this is great, and a great dark dread descended upon him.
Mm-hmm.
And God started to tell him about his future. This is going to happen to your children. This is going to happen. And I'm not going to, no spoilers at this moment. But then I want to show you, you'll go to your ancestors in peace in a ripe old age. And then this is going to happen. And then when the sun set, it was very dark, and there appeared a smoking oven and a flaming torch which passed between those pieces. And he made him a covenant. Now, what does that sound like? When the Jews stood at the foot of Sinai, when the Hebrews became a nation,
mm-hmm.
they were absolutely terrified.
Yes.
And fire descended on the mountain, and there was smoke, and there was a deafening horn that sounded like a shofar, but it was just some deafening sound. And there was dread, and this fire was hidden in the smoke, because if any of them had seen it, they would have died.
Right.
So God anesthetized Abraham, and what descended on Sinai descended on Abraham. That would have killed him. And he's under an anesthetic, but God's still speaking to him. So he can speak through the anesthetic, but the anesthetic is there just to keep him safe, right? And how cool is it that when the infinite presence of God, the Shekhinah, it imparts itself on the finite world, being that it's not finite, it's so apparently terrifying and cataclysmic that you see a burning bush, which the bush is not consumed by the fire, but you see just fire, and on Abraham, fire and smoke and a furnace and dread and terror and darkness. And the sages say that the Hebrews at the foot of Sinai kept on dying and then coming back to life again and dying because they had so much awe that it was killing their physical bodies. Right. When Moses asked to see God's face, like at the time of filming, that was the partial we did, God had to cover him over because he says, if you just see me, you're just going to die.
Right.
So that, when you link that back to what we're talking about today, that God is doing an operation. So back to my friend, the anesthesiologist, he said, listen, there's things that I would do to you, that a doctor would do to you under an anesthetic, which if you were awake would kill you.
Yeah. Traumatize you, kill you through trauma. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You couldn't lie still when someone takes out your appendix, right? You would be you would be fighting them. You can't. So to take a creature which is in effect a prototype human and bisect them into male and female, you can't do that. So God's first thought is, well, I'll prepare you, I'll anesthetize you, I'll make you safe, I'll make you still, I'll do what you need to do, and then from this you will be able to have a relationship. It's just mind blowing. I think it's such a cool idea. Because what is?
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Go on. No.
No. I want you to finish your thought.
Previously, last week, God said it's not good for man to be alone.
Correct.
This is why God brought the universe into effect in the first place. Because who was alone? God was completely alone. There was nothing but the infinite. So how did God bring about the universe? What did God make it out of? It's ex nihilo, but what there was the infinite. There wasn't anything that wasn't God. There wasn't any space or time or physics. It was all God. Einod milvado. There was nothing there but God. So when God brings about the universe, he's doing to itself what he's now doing to Adam. He's making something out of itself that he can then give to. And he's saying here to Adam, it's not good for you to be alone. You need someone to give to. You need someone to hold you to account, someone to be steel sharpening steel. And you need someone to provide for, just like I did. So he's giving to Adam what he gave to himself. Now, for God, it takes a whole universe. For Adam, it just takes one woman, who is the equivalent to Adam of the whole universe, right? Right. But isn't that kind of cool? He's doing this from experience.
Yes.
Sorry, what were we going to say?
No. I find a couple of things that are still puzzle me, and I don't really expect us to dive into this at this moment. But Adam and Eve did not receive skin until later. So
Yeah.
the explanation is there's something deeper in this division. There's something deeper in this quote unquote operation that is taking place. And I find it interesting also. It says, so God cast a deep sleep upon the human. And while he slept, God took one of his sides.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So here's the thing. You know, we've had the description, a Kabbalistic idea that says it was like front to back, you know, Adam and Eve. There were two of the same,
they couldn't face each other. Right.
So it was almost as if a splitting, a splitting off of the feminine aspect of Adam, but still, when you compare it to Abraham and you compare it to Sinai, you realize that something much more grand is happening than we probably can comprehend at this moment. Maybe we need to have some Kabbalistic scholar to come in, but this is profound. And I also find it interesting that when we talk about the Mishkan last week in the Torah portion, we talked about the copper laver. Was made up of women's mirrors that were polished and to entice their husbands to have relationships so that you could bear children in Egypt. And so when you get into all of the concepts behind it, you realize, wow, Hashem created woman for us to look into as a mirror. She is a reflection of us. And we see things that need to be corrected and adjusted, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like the mirror, I mean, there's so many mystical things about the laver, but the whole point is Eve was created to be the opposite of us, not in opposition, not to battle you, you know, not to argue with you and throw, dishes at you in the kitchen.
Right.
She's the one that keeps you in check. And that's how Hashem has made it. Right.
And that's absolutely right. And we all have that. Men and women all have that internal voice that says, I really should be doing better.
Right.
But having it as an external voice that said, you should really be doing better, that's really effective. But I would push back on one small part.
Go for it.
I contend that it's not that Adam was created first and then Eve was created afterwards.
I agree with you 100%. They both were created.
They were created. And then they were divided. And
the text says that. The text says that. It says he created them. Right.
And also, absolutely, it's right. It keeps on referring to them as swapping between him and them. And it says them a bunch of times. And even later, when she comes along and has a conversation with a snake, and he says, can you really not eat from any of the trees? She says, God told us this. And so that means that she remembers when God gave the rule about what you can eat and what you can't eat.
Exactly.
She didn't say, God told my husband and he told me. She said, God told us, because she was there, right?
Right.
And so I think that's really important, because naturally, if you take away the idea, if you make it rib rather than aspect, then you say, okay, well, she's later. There's nothing wrong with being a rib. We're not a people who think that the smaller part is the lesser part. Certainly, the Jews are a tiny nation, but they're not the least nation. They're a nation equal to all the others.
Think about this. The copper laver was the last thing built, but the first thing to engage to do service.
Oh, that's very interesting.
I'm telling you, the service couldn't happen without the laver, but the Shekinah wasn't dependent on the laver being there for it to come down.
And the whole of the Mishkan is a mirror for Gan Eden, because God takes this vast inhospitable universe where most of the universe we can't even breathe. We don't have anything to stand on. We've got nothing that we need, and He made this pale blue dot that has everything not only that we need, but everything we have ever needed in all of human history has been present on this pale blue dot. And then on this dot, God says, "Now you make a place for me." And I don't have physical needs. I don't need you to provide me with the air I breathe or the gravity. That's all taken care of. I don't need that. I'm infinite. God says instead, provide for my ritual needs. Make it holy. Don't allow anything profane to happen in there. Don't allow anything that would offend me to happen there. Make it beautiful. And you've just said, here comes the feminine mirror. And the first thing to be used is this thing. Because the reason you could use these mirrors is because they didn't participate in, they didn't give their jewelry to the golden calf. So they remained elevated. And so because of that, their offering is sacred.
And I find it quite interesting that the priest washes their hands and feet. Now, mind you, they mikvahed before they came in, so it wasn't that they were dirty. It was really about the intent of cleansing the process in which you're going to do your sacrifices, your hands and your feet.
Yeah.
Now, later on in halakha, we are told to wash our face and hands before studying Torah when you get up in the morning. But that's having to do with cleansing the internal parts because of our face. You know, the eyes are the gateway of the soul. But the whole issue is that when you see how it lays itself out in such a way that the priests go in, they reflect their intent. They go in with, listen, their intent has to be perfect. If not, they'll be destroyed. So their intent, it reminds me of getting ready to leave. And I do this on a regular basis. Honey, do I look okay like this? Before I go out?
Have you got any schmutz on my face?
Right. And she'll go, no, hold on, right here. Right? So the point is she is your helper, not a servant. And here's the other thing that I really liked about what you just mentioned. They're both the same. They're both the same. And now they're separated, but when they're married, they come back to become one flesh.
Right. And
so,
when God gives us our most holy ability to be creative, you know, the idea that we can, you know, to make a vessel that God can bestow life upon, we can only do that when we're together. When we take away that separation, then suddenly we're emulating. You know, we're never going to be equal to God, but we're supposed to try and pursue those qualities, right?
Yes, precisely. This verse helps to remind us how important marriage is, how important it is to have balance in your relationship with your spouse. It doesn't mean that it always goes perfectly well. I mean, sometimes when we look in a mirror, we don't necessarily like what we see. And, you know.
Absolutely. And when you're faced with something that you don't like what you see, that's your opportunity to not to scold yourself for what you don't like, but to improve yourself.
You don't break the mirror for crying out loud.
Right. It's not the mirror that's the problem. It's the thing you notice that you don't like.
It's like my hat is crooked, so let me change the mirror. And so this is why divorce is at 50% or more in this country. We want to change the mirror.
And I think that's right as well. Like I think I'm not blaming Meg Ryan personally, but there were a lot of films in the 90s that were all based about, you know, an image of love that's about getting what you want from the other person. I want to be swept off my feet. I want to be made to feel like a princess, or I want to be, you know, I want to be the knight on the white horse, whatever that idea. When actually this is saying, no, this is something you need. This isn't about, you know, you can't really function properly and fully to your full potential without this person, not because they're going to do things that you think is nice, not because they're going to cook your favorite food or do things that you like. It's because they're going to challenge you. They're going to drag you up and say, I believe in you, but also you better, you know, live up to that belief, you know. And it's about family.
It is.
It's about
this is
giving
slightly
to someone else. You know?
Yeah, this is slightly anecdotal, okay? But a lot of individuals that I know, especially my age, 60s and above, who I've known who were never married, often are not very refined in their, what do you call it, their social.
Yeah.
You understand
because
what I'm saying?
they can settle into their own comfort. They can say, well, I feel like doing this. You know, there's no one to go and say,
no one's ever told me this behavior. I knew someone, and amazing person, but he had this beautiful beard. Never was married, just a sweet guy. But while he's eating at the Shabbos table, he didn't use a napkin. He would just wipe his beard. So it'd be food particles all in his beard. So the point is, if I used to tell my wife, you know, if he was married, she would not let him do that. And she'd say, don't do that.
There was a story that Manis Friedman told, which is a kind of a beautiful and heartbreaking story. But he was asked for a meeting with a woman, and he said when he got to meet her, she hadn't really been looking after herself. She was, you could notice that she had a bit of a fragrance to her that wasn't ideal, and she was a bit disheveled. She wasn't really looking after herself. And that when you see that, you think this person isn't happy, because it becomes more and more difficult to feel comfortable in yourself, to feel your best when you're not happy. And so when she came to the room, he said, "If you mind, just don't close the door." And she said, "Why not?" And he said, "Because it's not proper for us to be alone, a man and a woman, unless we're married, And she started to cry. And she said, "No one's treated me like a woman for many years."
Wow.
And he said, "Wow, that's..." Because you could see that she could be angry. "Oh, why do you treat me differently from a man?" But actually, she doesn't want to be treated the same as a man. She wants to be treated as a woman. She wants to be treated as a person, and seen and experienced as another equal person who should be treated as if they need appropriate behavior, not just general, but appropriate to that person, to who they are.
Don't you think that our culture, and we're going to have to wrap it up here a little bit, don't you think our culture with our history, that because of the way women were presented as in a cultural system, that sometimes in some countries or whatever, they were sort of, they take care of the house. They were kind of relegated to a lower class. In this country, women couldn't vote, much less men. There were times that only landowners could vote in this country, right? So the point is that I think the women's liberation movement was created out of the desire to say, I want you to recognize that I have equal play in our relationship. And I really do think at the core, the substance of that movement, that it came out of a great idea that as men, we should recognize women are equal, and we need them. We need them in our lives. Yeah.
And the thing is, the intention is absolutely appropriate to say, well, we should be about empowering these people. We should be about taking away barriers that stop them from what they finding their purpose in life. But it's very hard to know when you're done. It's very hard to know when you've arrived. And the idea has got so crazy now that there is this demand that empowerment is now hypersexualized. Empowerment is now you should be flaunting yourself on the internet. You should, your sexuality isn't your possession. It belongs to everyone who wants to look at you, and none of that is expected of a man. So effectively, we feminism approached equality and then overshot, and now it's gone back into subjugation of women again.
Right. Well, there are a number of former leaders in that early movement that sort of distanced themselves from this postmodern concept of feminine, whatever you call it, recognition. We're out of time. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you guys for joining us.
Yes, I enjoyed it. It was really good. I hope you enjoyed it as the audience. And Moshe, as it always is, we really appreciate you taking time out of your late evening, and you teach a lot during the day. I don't know how you do numerous classes a day, but if you're interested in joining him and actually having either private tutors, I'm not sure if you have enough room for that, but a group, contact him at moshe.abrams@gmail.com.
Sorry.
No, I'm sorry, moshe.r. No.
There's no dots.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Moshe R. Abrams.
Abrahams, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, sorry about. Say it again.
No. Yeah, no, that's fine. So Moshe R. Abrahams. I'm going to try and make a shorter email. It's too long. Moshe R. Abrahams. It's very long to get it right.
Well, that's why when we were.
If anyone's emailed me and they haven't heard back from me, it may be that there's a spelling mistake. And I'm very sorry. I'll make a little truncated one for next week. And
yes, and look, I will also post it up at the bottom half, and you can see it right
beautiful.
Here as a class going on. Okay, Moshe, have a wonderful day. Enjoy your evening. I will say to you, Laila Tov, and enjoy your evening. Thank you.
And Sarayim Tov for you. Shalom.
Yes.
Shalom.